very quickly admit that my questions probably are a very small percentile of the general public. So.
Yeah, and well, I mean, and that's the thing is that stuff's great, but you know, it's also not being offered at 12 cents a compute hour, right? It's significantly higher.
$1.86.
Well, yeah, I hear you.
Yeah,
and,
I mean,
and if your alternative is spending $1 million on a cluster,
exactly,
that's one choice. But if your alternative is paying a few $1,000s for a relatively small model set, you know, it just depends. And we run into situations all the time, especially where a lot of those very, very expensive grids are also extraordinarily well managed. And if their utilization is 85 or 90% already, odds are it will cost more to move to a cloud vendor because you've already squeezed everything out of it. On the flip side, when you look at like the batch processing or Monte Carlo scenarios, those tend to be relatively low utilization. I'm not really sure why that is in terms of like what behavior difference is driving that, but a lot of those are only 20-25%. So there's a tremendous return on that investment. So anyway, we certainly are investigating. We got guys researching it even today, but I'm not really sure what the not being coy. I just don't know.
No, that's fine.
One second.
I was going to interject a comment. I think one of the things that happens things like HPE is in the cloud is you mentioned it was a small percentage of people who do it, but I think the cloud brings the opportunity for find new styles of computing. So, for example, I often share a scenario with customers, talking about scenarios that might fit the cloud. And one of them is you have some long-running process, like a batch process that you run at the end of the month, or the end of the quarter, and the end of the year. Typically, it takes a long time, and people are really hungry for the results of it.
Yep.
Well, maybe that process that takes 24 hours to run on a server, if you design your software right, you could run in 1 hour on 24 servers that you very temporarily use in the cloud. So I think there's a potential here to new styles of doing things that a lot of flexibility.
Right. Yeah, I 100% agree. And we are seeing more and more and more parallel scenarios come up, and it's moving away from necessarily the majority being core science, which maybe 15 years ago it was all primarily in science and with a little bit of finance. And then I think we kind of crossed this boundary maybe 5 years ago where it's actually mostly finance. But now it's actually moving into kind of this phase 3 where you have science, you have finance, and you have everybody else who just wants to do kind of the Hadoop model or the MapReduce type of scenario. And the only way to really do those effectively is really cloud. I mean, just the amount of processing that you need, and it's so intermittent that it's very hard to justify the level of investment needed to do anything of like big scale. I mean, you can do MapReduce on a single machine, but it's not going to go through petabytes of data. But when you come back to that data set, that's the other interesting bit, right? That we got to work around these workflows, because you have these situations where you might have 1 million data sources, sensor data or just customer data or retail shops, whatever. I mean, but branch offices, but it's scattered all over and it's being generated all the time. What ends up happening is everybody coalesces all that data into a single point. Well, now you've got this massive blob of corpus or whatever you want to call it, of data. I mean, well, before you can do anything with it, you got to get it closer to the compute, right? And so now you've created this monster of how do I move petabytes to the cloud so I can do something. Whereas, really the right answer is, well, you got to change that workflow. Instead of coalescing everything first on premise and then transferring to the cloud, it goes through the cloud, and you either store it, you do kind of a store and forward so you can do the processing there, or you do some kind of normalization so you're transferring less, which is even better. But it's finding that workflow, right? And if you can find the workflow, the scenarios actually start become much, much, much easier. So,
colloquially, the sort of magic number for HPC server in 2008 was 256 a month, and for R2 it's been said it's around 1,000. How does that change with the addition of Azure? Does that number is that number tied to sort of what the software can sort of manage from a management standpoint, or does that number go through the roof with Azure, or is it still sort of?
Yeah, you'd have to ask the HPC team what they've tested to, but there's the test limit versus the operational limit, and also what scenario it is. Because HPC server also does like bare metal stand up and some other things. So I know that their goal was to get over 1,000, as just a tested, well understood scenario, and we know we have customers who've used more. But really, that's a question for them to find out what they're comfortable with. I do know that even at Grid on Wall Street, we were demonstrating into 1,000.
I have a question I know the answer for, but I just need to keep pushing it. So compliance. FSMA low, FSMA moderate. Is there work in those spaces?
I can't speak to specific certifications. So we do have SAS 70 Level 2 and ISO 27001.
Right. So, and the premise for the question is, just yesterday, Amazon announced publicly that they are FSMA low certified, which opens up a great deal of doors.
So
that
we are
and monitoring are both very
right. So we are working on a number of certifications. I can't comment on specifics.
Can you talk a little bit to sort of your vision or your sort of picture of what you think the future is for the Azure appliance?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it we've already announced, but I'm happy to go through some of it. I mean, really, the Microsoft vision is to take this technology that we're developing for our data centers and make it available to hosters and end customers. Right? And so we've announced 4 key partners. They're going to be going live, in a matter of months, and running their apps or whatever. So, but because Microsoft fundamentally is about providing these technologies, we're not really in the data center business per se. That's just where we needed somebody. We needed to be at scale, and it was really hard to find somebody who was at our scale to do this. So we did it. So now we've proven it out, and we can let others do it. And some of it is allowing for some scenarios that are just really hard to do in the public cloud, or they're infeasible. For example, with a lot of our particularly very large customers, government agencies or private firms, where they have extremely strict territorial boundary requirements. Okay, well, not every territory is going to get a data center. It's infeasible. Well, this would be a way for a provider to provide Azure type services to people, or to their customer base, and they can provide those territorial boundaries, and that is a feature differentiator. It may not be a bits and bytes one, but it doesn't make it any less important. And so that's one way that some of these complaints are going to go away, is that, oh, well, it has to be within my territorial boundaries, and how does that work? Oh, okay, well, you just go to your provider, to a partner that you don't have, and they will provide it to you. Okay, that's one scenario. Another scenario is we just have some very large customers who arguably are providers unto themselves. They just happen to be private, their only customer base is themselves. Okay, well, this is a way for them to do that as well, and that could be for some government agencies. It could be for some large enterprises. Will it be for everybody? No, probably not. I mean, some of it's just cloud really only works at a certain scale point. And below that, it's just far, far more economical to leverage it, through a provider. Now, what is that scale point? Don't really know. We're working that out. Some of it's a moving target. As we get better technology density and we can do more things, it can be smaller, but by the same token, you need to have capacity and failover and all this other stuff, and have to maintain utilization. So there are all these conflicting deliverables that we need to work through, and we are working on it. But it's going to be, this is a journey. And to my knowledge, there's no other cloud vendor planning on providing their technology to what is arguably, by some definitions, their competitors. But because of who Microsoft is, we don't view them as competitors. We view them as a partner channel.
It's interesting that you word it that way, because what I'm hearing is we looked around, or Microsoft looked around and said, okay, we don't have anybody at the scale that we need, so let's build that out. Now let's provide mechanisms so that other people can do that. So do you see at some point combining with all those partners and just pushing out and backing off on your own investment in the data centers and just letting a group do that?
Yeah,
not really.
Following up on that, one could argue that BPOS there is actually killed a number of your former partners in the hosting space.
Yeah, that I know. I'm not a BPOS guy. But what we're kind of trying to get to is saying that it's more, when you look at something like Azure, it's more than just compute, or it's more than just a bunch of disks, right? It's this ecosystem. And what a hoster would provide would be a different ecosystem. And what an internal single drop within an enterprise or an agency would be a different ecosystem. And it could be that a particular application with a particular set of end users or a particular goal may be best served by an ecosystem of true public cloud, which would be provided by Microsoft. It could be that there's other apps that need a different ecosystem. And it could be for purely business reasons. There's no technical reason that it would not run. But that's actually, that's kind of the nirvana, where, oh, there's this, I have this app, I have this drop-down list. Now I can make a rational decision based on what is best for the end users or for the scenario about where should it run. If you run in the Microsoft data center, you get to run on the Microsoft network, and that provides tremendous value. But you may have an app that really doesn't leverage any of that, or may have fantastically strict compliance rules. And while, yes, you could conceivably run it there, the overhead and the number of meetings you have to go to get it there makes it non-economical. So it may be better to say, oh, well, you know what? I'm not going to get to run on the Microsoft network, but I can deploy it faster and I don't have to go to as many meetings. The hoster wins. Right? And so you just pick.